Hey gang, it's JC, and this is the Daily Dose for Monday, February 21st, 2011. A combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Brentwood. If you got a website up and it's just not producing the sort of results that you would like to see it produce, there's something called web strategy. You got to strategize like anything else or any place else when you're putting websites out there, and this is what Mind Active specializes in. Give them a call anytime, find their information on the internet. I should probably get a phone number and give it to you one of these days, but I'm lazy today, like a lot of people, because we had our first baseball practice yesterday. You've heard me talk about this on and off the last couple of years. About 3 years ago, Bob Ramsey, after years of coaxing, Bob, my friend from 101 ESPN, and of course the slew basketball games, just play-by-play, been doing it for many, many years. Should be doing baseball play-by-play, by the way, but that's another story. Bob coerced me into trying out for the Men's Senior Baseball League, and I'm going on my 4th season right now, and we have a blast out there. It was 70 degrees for our practice outside yesterday. Today it's turned ugly. Every bone in my body hurts. My hair hurts today, but that's part of the process. You hurt when you go out there and you start moving around. You start to use muscles and muscle groups that haven't been moving in about 6 months, and that's just part of the process. So here we go. Speaking of baseball, I had a very interesting chance encounter with Andy Van Slyke over the weekend. Now, let me tell you about Andy. 1985 Cardinal World Series in Los Angeles. I've talked about this before. We're sitting there broadcasting from the Cardinals Hotel, right there in the lobby of their hotel. And we've got Stan and Lil Musial, and we've got Mark Price, who is an actor from St. Louis who was on Family Ties back in the day. And everybody's all excited because we're waiting for Jack Clark to hit a home run so we can come back and play in the World Series. We didn't know it then. So, and Andy was one of the guys who, way back in 1985, because John Hewlett, my partner at the time, knew Andy somewhat, and so Andy came over and said we'd do the show together, and Andy made terrific contributions. He was funny and everything like that. So then Andy gets traded away to Pittsburgh. We sort of lose track of him, and then he comes back. And the next thing I know, Andy has got a lot to say about politics. And it's very clear that Andy is a very conservative Christian guy. And I'll hold that against him. That's his own business. Okay, I think that stuff is silly, but, that's what he's into. And so, I respect it to at least to some extent. So Andy's making sort of snide comments about the Democrats, and, that's our job to make snide comments about the Democrats. So, on and on it goes. And then, so then Andy tries to make a comeback with the St. Louis Cardinals and doesn't really get along with Tony La Russa. And the comeback effort just sort of falls short very, very quickly. All right, so now fast forward to the 2006 World Series. And Andy is the first base coach for the Detroit Tigers. And you'll recall that Kenny Rogers, one of their pitchers, was caught cheating because you saw on the inside of his hand he had all this pine tar stuck all over the place, which gives a pitcher better grip, and if you have better grip, you can get better motion on the ball, etc. and so forth. And we're just all over Kenny Rogers and Detroit for trying to cheat. And Kenny Rogers was a jerk off anyhow because, he had gone after a reporter when he was playing for the Texas Rangers. Some reporter he didn't like and just, came out onto the field one day and just went right for the guy and knocked him over and, was roughing him up and everything like that. So Kenny Rogers is one of those goofy type A's anyhow. So now you catch him cheating in the World Series, and he's got this pine tar inside his hand. And, they catch him, and it's on his uniform and the whole thing. The umpires stopped the game. They're going to throw him out of the game. They didn't. Long story made short, Andy Van Slyke, being a member of the Detroit Tigers organization, comes to the defense of Kenny Rogers and says, people are, St. Louis Cardinal fans getting all excited. He's got some melted Tootsie Roll inside his hand. So I'm thinking to myself, temperature was about 34 degrees at game time, so nothing's melting, not a Tootsie Roll, not nothing. The man is cheating, and he got caught, and Andy is defending him, and I think that's a bunch of bull. So I sort of got on Andy, and I just sort of got to the point where I was getting tired of his act a little bit, and I talked about it a lot on the air. Okay, so I hadn't seen Andy now for several years. Saturday night, we're at a restaurant in West County. We walk in, here comes Andy and his lovely wife, Lori. Lori is just one of those statuesque, beautiful women. And Andy, by the way, you could argue that Andy's in better shape now than he was in his playing days. The man is a rock. He looks like he must spend 8 hours a day in a gym. It's not that he's so, overly muscular like Arnold or something, but he's just built, the guy's built like a rock and just flat stomach. If there's an ounce of fat on his body, and see it. So Andy, I see him, our eyes make contact, and I get up and I go over to see Andy, and we start talking. And I don't know, by the way, if Andy is aware of the fact that I had been sort of critical of him, very critical of him. Let's not sugarcoat it. Long story made short, if that's possible at this point, I finally confront Andy about that, and I say, Andy, just tell me the truth, God's honest truth. Were you just being a good teammate in defending Kenny Rogers, or did you mean what you said, and that you thought that it was a big deal about nothing, and that Kenny Rogers shouldn't have been criticized for cheating? And Andy went into I wouldn't call it a tirade, more of a soliloquy. And the crux of his argument is, and he said, that he did believe what he said about Kenny Rogers, and he was defending him. That first of all, he said, all pitchers cheat, which is interesting. He says, that sounds like a hitter, by the way. But he says, you go out in July and there's going to be guys cheating. But you'll recall how cold it was. I said, yeah, I was sitting in the right field auxiliary press box freezing my ass off. He's like, well, pitchers do that because your fingers are cold. You can't feel the ball. You can't feel the stitching. He says, you're a baseball player. He says, you know what a brand new ball feels like. It's slick. It almost has, it's almost like a glaze over it, which is why they rub it up with with that dirt from down south, with that clay. He says, it was a safety issue. I'm like, all right, what? He says, if a pitcher who's throwing 90, 95 miles an hour, the case may be, throwing breaking balls, sliders, fastballs that tail in on a right-handed hitter, that sort of stuff, says if you go out there and you are and you really can't feel the ball, you can't get a grip on the ball, you could kill somebody with that ball. I started to think about it. I'm thinking to myself, no, hold your ground here, hold your ground. Andy is putting his spin on this, and the more I thought about it, the more Andy made his case. I think maybe I'm going to change my position on this. First of all, it's impossible to not like Andy. Even if you are an agnostic Democrat, liberal, and you know that Andy couldn't be any further from you on the scale of political, social activity, it's impossible to hate Andy Van Slyke. He's like the most gregarious, likable guy ever. Even when he says stuff where you're like, oh, jeez. It's impossible to dislike this guy. So we had a very nice chat, and then as we were leaving, we went back over to the bar where they were sitting. They were sitting at the bar because it was a crowded restaurant. You couldn't get a table. And so we went back over there and said hello and everything, and I talked about it a little more, showed him a picture of my little baby daughter, and they seemed to get a kick out of that. So Andy Van Slyke, just very, very interesting. Long history with this guy. I've known him for almost 27 years now, and lives next door to Mike Bush. Andy has a batting cage in his basement. He's got a big house out in West County near Chesterfield Mall, and in his basement he's got regulation, full, like what you would see underneath Busch Stadium, where the guys go in and maybe take a few swings before the game or between at bats. And so Andy's got that in his house, and he's got 4 sons, and one of them is a big prospect, Major League Baseball prospect. So we wish the Van Slykes the best with all of that. And speaking of sports and baseball and stuff like that, we will be 2 weeks from today. We will be doing our last show from Cardinal Spring Training. I leave for Florida a week from tomorrow, and we do our first show from Jupiter, Roger Dean Stadium. I almost said Al Lang. Listen to that. I almost went back to Tampa St. Pete. So anyhow, we're going to do a bunch of shows from Cardinal Spring Training, and we'll talk more about that in the upcoming days and weeks. Other little bits and pieces of news for you. The Cars are going to have their first album release in 24 years. This is the real Cars, or at least, well, you can't have Benjamin Orr because he died. He had pancreatic cancer, but Rick Ocasek. And by the way, that is the correct pronunciation. It's not Ocasek, it's Ocasek. Anyhow, the new single is called Blue Tip, and that's going to be coming out in a couple of days. Album's coming out on May 10th. Camille Grammer, Kelsey Grammer's ex-wife, is doing red carpet fashion reporting from the Oscars on Sunday for CNN. Oh, man. If you want to get pictures of boobs up on Facebook, their unwritten policy is that if it's a sculpture or a drawing, they allow it. So now you know. Just a little bit of piece of useless information for you. And Denise Richards says that she uses books to help her daughters understand their dad, Charlie Sheen. Their favorite is, Green Eggs and Whores. All right, what do we got here? JC's Eye Candy today. Got the Oscars coming up on Sunday. We're going to be doing our Oscar show on the Big 550 KTRS along with Trish Gazelle. And so that's coming up here on Friday. We're going to have some other people that you know and love participating in that show on Friday on the Big 550 KTRS, so be listening for that. Today, words of wisdom from 40 movies in 7 minutes. 40 movies in 7 minutes, inspirational lines from those films. So enjoy that today on JC's Eye Candy at jcontheline.com, right below what you're looking at right now. That's it, JC's Daily Dose for Monday, February 21st, 2011, a combined venture with Mind Active in beautiful downtown Brentwood. Don't forget Trish's Trash at 1250 on the showgram every day on KTRS, the Big 550. In the meantime, we've beaten this one to death. Have a good one. See you later. Bye.